Hello everyone and welcome to World End ECONOMiCA, the 3-part kind of mini epic made by the creator of Spice and Wolf. I've had this game sitting in my Steam library for some time and I thought, why not play them? They are allowed to be played according to Sakai Project's media streaming policies, so there's that. Trying to, not step on anyone's toes. Text speed fast. Always have the fast text speed. Always. Okay, seems alright. Let's start. In the past, people really believed that there was a doorway to an alternate world on the dark side of the moon. And it entered. What the? Okay, there we go. This dark side could not be seen from Earth, and it was only a few decades ago that images were successfully taken of it. I have to have the mouse on there. As Earth had been visited, mapped, and divested of all of its mysteries and secrets, it was made painfully clear that there were no rabbits on the moon, no traces of aliens, and certainly no pieces of portals to alternate worlds. This was perhaps why the journey to the dark side of the moon through the vastness of space was so fascinating for me when my parents took me there as a kid. Mankind had never set foot upon any of the glittering stars that were arrayed before me. When I realized that, I felt a desire to leave my footprints where no one had gone before. It wasn't until after I learned more about this world that it dawned on me what a foolhardy dream that really was. Regardless, it was something that shook me to the core so much that I nearly wet my pants. Afterwards, everything before me became a stepping stone in my mind towards my dream of setting foot where no one had gone before. I had no time to waste. If I didn't act now, then someone else would leave their footprints there first. Faster, faster, much faster. The population continued to grow and time ruthlessly slipped away. Only a handful could be vanguard of it all. Not a day went by where I didn't ponder what I could see. It would be a new frontier where familiar places, customs in the past would not exist. A frontier where every small movement I made would become part of history. The footprints of the first humans on the moon could still be found preserved in the Sea of Tranquility Memorial Hall. Those footprints told uncountable tales. Footprints left in the sand, measuring just shy of 30 inches. Even so, they were amazing footprints that sent shivers down my spine. What was it? One of the astronauts, he would always make a joke about the moon landing, and he was like, oh, I guess you just had to have been there. With a click, my mobile PC turned on. I awoke to the whirring of the hard drive. As I had fallen asleep curled up in my chair while clutching my PC, it was difficult to get my body to move. My body felt so stiff, I was sure that a careless motion would just break something. Even so, I rather enjoyed the sensation of slowly stretching out my limbs from this cramped position after waking up. It made me feel alive and truly let me know that I was awake. I willed my arms to move, then my legs. Although hardly efficient, this was how I chose to do things, and that was what happened when I woke up every morning. It was a satisfying action, and one I never had a chance to savor before I left home. On top of the table, I had left my rather crude diode lamp on, and a coarse layer of fat had formed on the surface of the leftover coffee in my dirty cup. Beside my cup was a half-eaten chocolate bar, which I reached for and crammed into my mouth. I swallowed the unpleasantly sweet chunk as the PC finished booting up. At that moment, my brain went to work as I verified that I had my wallet, memory cards, and bag on me, and that none of it had been stolen while I was asleep. It appeared that I had survived the previous night. Only then did I breathe a sigh of relief. However, in order for me to survive today, I would have to make some money. It had been 3 months and 12 days since I left home. Telling myself that I wasn't just some well-to-do kid pretending to be a ruffian, I flipped open the organic display. I was staying in a cheap net cafe. It was a good-for-nothing establishment that reached Wi-Fi from another shop, and its customers were of equally questionable quality. Hey kid, a fine morning, isn't it? As I left the booth to go wash my face, an unkempt clerk greeted me as he played a game at the counter. My god, what is that hairdo? I figured he wasn't so much being friendly as much as he was making sure I knew he was watching me. The only entrance and exit were next to the counter, and off to the side on the wall were the words, "Everyone pays, no freeloaders." Even though the sad excuse for a building was built in a sewage canal, money was always collected. The only thing that concerned me when I left home was finding a place to sleep. Though I had some money, I couldn't really change my appearance. A fine morning. I'm not fond of your sarcasm, Earth Dog. Clark's face twisted with a smile at my retort. Oh! It is unfortunate to know what a real morning looks like, since the weather here is just a computer program. He said that lightly as he returned to his gaze to his game. Seemed to be from Earth. Though I wondered if he came to the moon as unskilled labor, got fired, and ended up here as an outcast of some sort. Why don't you head back to Earth then? At my words, he turned briefly to glance at me and laughed sarcastically. Things are a bit better here than down there anyhow. That's how he responded. Moon scum. Without responding, I went to the washroom. Moon scum, how dare he? My name's Yoshiharu Kawara. I was born and raised in this lunar city, so I was genuine moon scum. I returned to my booth, entered my password, and booted up the tool application on my computer. A welcome screen whose only good point was its friendliness was followed by a merciless and desolate landscape, much akin to the surface of the moon, actually. Countless lines of words flickered on the screen. I imagine it's the kind of effect you get if you took a picture of the undeveloped part of the moon's surface with a low-res camera. The screen showed a session of the Lunar Stock Exchange. This was the kind of place for moon scum like me to make a living. I'll get rich without needing to break a sweat. I didn't have enough time to earn an honest living. I took a deep breath and went about business. Downward revision for the first fiscal quarter of CK Bio. Possibility of an investigation into Emerald Industries over suspicions of collusion. Regarding inflation, the board of directors of the Lunar Central Bank. With one eye on that stream of news, I focused on managing 220 stocks, picking up those with large price fluctuations. For instance, if one stock had moved 10% on the previous day and another had moved 1%, there was probably a high chance that that stock that moved 10% could move by 1% today. I would trade it on that notion alone. In the turbulent up and down movement of the price, I could extract some profit, which is what I occupied myself with between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. lunar time. Between those hours, the only things that went into my mouth were food that I could eat one-handed and drinks. To be honest, I'd be so engrossed in training that breaks were uncommon. Even if I had the free time to take a break, I'd rather use it to look at my screen to track price fluctuations and do some trades. After all, a difference of a few minutes when making the call to buy or sell could easily mean the difference between gaining or losing 1 or 2%. My war chest was 72,000 mools. That's a funny name. 1% of that came out to 700 mools. Store clerk here would make 7 mools an hour at best. This was a place where a public school teacher's monthly starting salary is 1,200 mools, so I could make in a few minutes, but they'd make in a month. Of course, over the course of a day's trading, some people would win and others would lose, of course. But I was on the winning streak of all of the streaks, and before I knew it, my seed money of 1,000 mools had ballooned to 72 times that. The one and only time I did honest hard labor in my life was to build that seed money. You know, you have to have money to make money. Since then, I'd be building my assets through these trades. While the gains were a little less than what they used to be, the greater your assets grew, the faster they grew. You know, the more money you can put in, the faster you get more money, or the more you'll get it. So it didn't worry me. It'd be what they called a snowball effect, you know. I'd never seen snow before, but I'd seen videos of Earth before, and thus I was familiar with it. I had decided that I was going to make even more money, and then live in the center of this lunar city. It's a place where tons of ridiculously smart people were gathered. It's said that 70% of this world's wealth was held by people there. 70%. I live it up there. And then... the back of my head was high on these kinds of delusions as I performed trade after trade like a man possessed. That's why it took me a while to notice. I finally did after I got smacked on the head. Ow! Yo, kid! I turned around to see that clerk from before standing in front of the booth's open door. What, you want money? Since when did this place become prepay? Or was it something else? Was making money not allowed here? What do you want? I'm busy. As I glared at him, the overly skinny, bleary-eyed clerk let out a tired sigh. That's your reply. I came to tell you that the police are on their way to gather up street urchins, and before the clerk finished his sentence, my PC had been closed and thrown into my bag. Hey, wait! The employee grabbed my shoulder as I tried to push him aside and exit the booth. Though he was thin, he was still muscular, strong enough to remind you that he was an adult. Still, I always kept a set of money in my breast pocket for times like this. I grabbed it and thrust it into his hands. Keep the change. Filthy animal. I put on my hat, shouldered my bag, and ran down a narrow corridor. Wondering what was going on in the booth, a bunch of guys who looked like they just mumbled useless replies to any police questioning peeked through the cracks from their booths, wondering if someone had been arrested. Sliding past the dirty counter, I made it to the store's even filthier exit. The chipped away paint and rust made the already cramped building feel even more claustrophobic. I ran straight down the hallway toward the open air. There were stairs as if I turned left through the end of the hall, but I never had any plans to use them in the first place. Without a moment's hesitation, I kicked off the floor, jumping as high as I could, passing over the concrete wall. My body flew out over the street. Because the cafe was on the 5th floor of the building, there was a heck of a view below me. I jumped toward the wall of the building opposite me, then kicked off from that wall, aiming back towards the wall of the first building. Once the sole of my foot hit a pipe on the wall, I jumped straight up with all of my strength and resolve. Human genes have been fine-tuned for living on Earth for over millions of years. So with some weight training, anyone could perform feats like these on the moon, where the gravity was lower. What you couldn't do was to allow yourself to miss your daily training. Jumping from wall to wall, I quickly reached the 14th floor of the building next door. I guess my heart rate did go up a bit. I glanced down to see a pair of blue uniformed policemen looking bored as they tapped the batons on their shoulders and climbed the stairs. And the clerk wasn't playing a prank on me when he gave me that tip. I already paid my thanks to him when I handed him that money, though. By now, I should probably have already used the change from it to kick back with the store-bought beer. For a moment, I opened my bag in the hallway and flipped open my PC. I ran off in the middle of a trade until my position hadn't changed. I should be able to get at least a weak wireless connection out here. If I were lucky, prices would have risen, and I'd be home free, but usually at times like this... Figures. After hanging my head in disappointment, I closed up my losing positions and called it a day. Can't win them all. Nothing good could come of wandering around downtown in the middle of the day. After jumping from one building to the next, I decided to walk down the deserted hallway toward my favorite Chinese restaurant. It was the time of day where most people my age would be at school, so walking around carelessly would get you chased down by the cops before you know it. Until you turned 18, the legal age here, it was mandatory that you belonged to some sort of educational institution. Some people would say that this was a good thing, while others grumbled something about government-funded programs. I fell into neither camp. My way of dealing with systems I didn't like was to quietly escape them, not to loudly criticize them. On that note, this area, with all of its complicated passages and extreme elevation changes, it's not odd to see the 7th floor of one building be next to the basement of another. It was convenient for people like me. Not to mention the overgrown vegetation here and there was acted as good cover. These plants weren't originally included in the city plans, but had leaked out of one of the many lunar laboratories where they were messing with their genes. Supposedly, genes had tons of factors that expressed themselves differently depending on the environment, so a lot of plants and animals started acting strangely as soon as they were brought to the moon. There were even people saying that life forms on Earth could have originated from outer space and brought to Earth via the moon. Some of these plants grew so well on the moon's inorganic matter that you might wonder if they've been around here for a million years. Of course, it wasn't as if these plants were free from the laws of physics. Nitrogen and other nutrients for them were often brought over from Earth. Though I hadn't heard about any worries that the surface of the moon would be taken over by the greenery, this applied to more than just plants. As for humans here, it didn't really matter how many ultra-elite think tanks came to energize the lunar economy and its industries. Life here just wasn't sustainable without sending a lot of things over from Earth. According to the government statements, even if the orbital elevator were to stop moving today, there are currently enough biomass here to create an enclosed, recycling-based environment. In other words, we'd be able to eat food, crap it out, then use that crap to grow more food to eat, and so on and so forth. They'd be able to make a ton of electricity with solar panels while collecting direct sunlight to use as a super hot source of heat. So maybe they're right. I mean, people even say that Earth was in more danger environmentally since they're still relying on oil and nuclear power. I didn't know who was right. Whatever the case, I had dreams. And if it meant making my dreams come true, I didn't care if I was on Earth or the moon. After all, my dream was to stand at the forefront of humanity. It'd be at a place where you could look forward and live by advancing onward. Who cared about what happened to the world behind you? And if I couldn't make this dream come true, then there'd be no reason for me to live. That was why, to put it logically, I'd never worried a single bit about the moon's environment or whatever. What I worried about was how much money I made and how fast I reached my goals. While I was thinking about these things, I passed through the thickly vegetated tunnel towards high ground. Boy, ain't that a view. It was a clear day, as it always was. On the other side of a translucent membrane, the visible half of the mist-covered earth looked small. The sky over the lunar city was wrapped in a see-through dome, and right beyond it was outer space. Gravity was weak on the moon, so you couldn't naturally keep large amounts of gases stored upon the surface. Also, while apparently each 24-hour day on Earth had a morning, afternoon, and night, which was followed by the next day by another morning, the moon alternated between 2 weekdays and 2 weeknights. However, the human body cycle was set differently, thanks to tens of thousands of years of living on Earth. Because most of the people living on the moon were immigrants from Earth, its dome was adjusted to give off light in an Earth-like way. It even had sprinklers attached to it so that it would rain. However, I'd only seen things like downpours and thunderstorms in videos. When it rained here, it was always just a drizzle. Strong winds never blew here. The only winds felt here were the slow, coiling movement of the atmosphere due to centrifugal and Coriolis forces, as well as the gentle breeze of the air inside the dome being mechanically circulated. I strayed from the street onto a grass-covered cliff and jumped upward with a grunt. Kicked off a tree branch and rotated my body to land on the top of the tunnel. This was a box seat where you can look down on the greater part of the city. Wow, look at that view. As I say twice. I grabbed some beef jerky out of my bag and bit into it. According to the guys who came from Earth, this wasn't at all close to the real thing, but it's still a beef jerky I know. There were a number of cities on the moon. The one I lived in was the very first city to be created, and I could get a clear view of the whole thing from here. The spot in front of me where the pointed skyscrapers sprung upward one after another was called Newton City. It wasn't like entry here was regulated. However, it had the feel of a special zone where only certain people could enter, since it was full of giant corporate buildings. Even public places like shopping malls and parks were overrun with police and city regulations. Most wealth here was created in Newton City, and you could find famous tycoons with assets worth over 10 billion moles all over the place. If you had that much wealth, you'd undoubtedly be able to be on the forefront when humanity took its next step. Money could make just about any desire you might have in this world come true. In this world, money ruled all. Like a photograph of the moment a drop of liquid hit a pool of water, a group of skyscrapers stood in the dead center of Newton City, while the buildings around that area were suddenly much shorter. That area was where the middle-class people who worked in Newton City lived, and was called the Green City, or the White Belt. It was a place full of people who loved words like high society and refinement, the kind of people who claimed to care about grace and harmony, but were really full of nothing but pride and obsessions with upward mobility. Wherever I went there, I felt sick seeing the sterilized rows of small, nicely manicured lawns and white-walled buildings. There wasn't a single piece of garbage on the streets, and the only plants around were domesticated trees on the roadside. After that, the buildings in the area around the Green City got taller again, but it was a less complete jumble. Their power lines dangled messily onto the streets, and vulgar neon signs lit the area, painting the whole place with a feel of squalor. The area was called the Outer Sections, and while technically they'd all been numbered from 1 to 8, there was no real point. If you consider Newton City the center of everything, the north was full of factories. There you could find silicon dioxide dissolution factories, fertilizer synthesis factories, automated plantations, and so on. On the east side was the village where I lived. That area was notorious for its hard-nosed residents. You could also find settlements of old-timers, whom you might call artisans in the area, which made for a countless number of small workshops. Most people didn't have the luxury of being able to do something like transport wooden furniture via orbital elevator, and land was expensive on the moon, so the houses of Green City were small. As a result, handmade furniture created with the size and shape of your house in mind was far more popular than ready-made furniture. I was told that my parents were aiming to live together with plants brought from Earth in exchange for making furniture out of wood. Even though factories existed that used the best scientific advances to maximize harvest rates as much as physically possible, they still grew plants by hand for some reason. They seemed to at least have their customers, but I didn't see a single enjoyable thing about being covered in dirt. This made me wonder why they even came to the moon in the first place. I mean, this wasn't a place for stuff like that. The moon was supposed to be a place where you directed your gaze to the top of the inorganic buildings that line Newton City. And if I shifted my eyes to the left, I saw an area haunted by those who couldn't keep up in that struggle. Here, where buildings started rusting, no one would bother to repaint them. It had been nicknamed the Red Valley. The reason it was called a valley was because when Newton City was originally built on a flat crater floor, all of the low-income earners made the Rocky Mountains surrounding the city their home. And by Rocky Mountains, I don't quite mean something like the harsh mountainous environments you might find on Earth. It was actually close to what you might call highlands. As a result, the rock was chipped away to increase surface area like a river eroding hills. And many structures could be built in a tight area by terracing the slopes. Furthermore, more space was secured by digging caves into the rocky stretches. It was clearly evident that doing this over and over made for a mess of a city. Not much more than a decade had passed since the city's establishment, and it had already become such a devilish haunt that you wouldn't blame the local government if they just threw up their hands and gave up. As for me, I liked the Red Valley with this level of squalor. While it was true that people living there could be called outcasts and failures, the place was irresponsible in a good way, and that put me at ease. Of course, I had no intentions of becoming the 20% that lived there. And finally, the area around where I was right now was called the 6th Outer Section. It was not quite as degenerative as the Red Valley, but it was not quite as productive as the east side of town. This area didn't even have a nickname yet, and yet its lackadaisical aspect oozed out at every turn. While the buildings were dirty and worn out, it was dotted with small companies and who dreamed of Newton City and the occasional decent-looking house. That wasn't the worst place to live. I stood up, hopped back down the street, and jogged off. The road was paved with neatly shaved limestone rocks. It was chipped and cracked here and there, but no one ever tried to patch it. The rough dirt of the moon had piled up in its recesses. Waterways were occasionally visible, and in them you could see clear running water as well as fish swimming. While hydrogen was available on the moon, there was no water. So much hydrogen had been synthesized into water, it was made sure that every drop remained circulating within the dome. Waterway's final destination was the giant water processing plant under Newton City. In other words, everything was designed to gather in the center of the mortar-shaped city, whether it's people, water, or wealth. From there, everything was disseminated outwards. After crossing the intricate waterways and bridges, I passed through a narrow alley and reached my destination, called the Lunar Chinese Restaurant. Run by a Chinese couple with a strong spirit of enterprise who emigrated to the moon. I could sit down here from early afternoon till whenever, and they would. However, the elderly's wife's health had been fading recently, and the woman who sometimes worked at the restaurant in the place was a bit of a pain. While I prayed that she wouldn't be there today, it was in vain, especially on an unlucky day already full of policemen and stock losses. As I opened the frosted glass door, the woman watching the television, placed near the ceiling with her head resting in her arms, propped up on the counter, lowered her gaze listlessly. While I was overcome with the urge to just shut the door and go to another store, the woman raised her voice before I got the chance. "Table for one." The kitchen was run by the silent, stubborn, elderly husband of the family, so he never showed any signs of affection. Of course, no reply came from the kitchen. Even so, it was too late to leave, so I entered the store with a heavy gate and set up camp in a corner seat. While mountains of hydrocarbons sat on the moon's poles, they still couldn't be used for luxuries such as making plastic. As a result, most of the store's equipment was made from either wood or iron. Both could be gathered on the moon and were easily decomposable by microbes when thrown away. An iron cup was placed with a clang on my tattered wooden table, which was no doubt found in a dump somewhere. The woman, beaming, then poured me water from high up. The water seemed to get shit splashed out, but it all stayed in the now perfectly filled cup. "You showed up, you delinquent." Crab omelet over fried rice. I made my order bluntly without a proper reply. The woman was about 20 years old and had bright, silky hair. She'd been working here for a while and seemed to know a lot of the customers, so she probably lived in the area. One crab fried. The woman yelled cheerfully toward the kitchen, then of all the things she could have done, she sat down across from me. Except her body was off to the side and her vision was fixed on the TV. She seemed interested in some plot point in the drama she was watching. I heard that actor there is in the area right now. He's going to negotiate his next title and bask in space at the same time. A beautiful actress from around here is accompanying him. I didn't ask, but she informed me anyway. Thank you. I ended up glancing at the screen as I silently took my PC out of my bag. He's a little too handsome though. While that may be true, I stifled my urge to reply with a "so what" as I placed my PC on the table and switched it on. The PC was loaded up with financial information and charts of historical prices for the 4,000 stocks on the Lunar Stock Exchange. In order to make a profit tomorrow, I had to find my next target. Oh, want to use star power? I raised my glance after being asked a question and found my eyes meeting the woman's. She had beautiful almond-shaped eyes that were even brighter in color than her hair. I must have led an easy life, I thought to myself. Nevertheless, it'd be helpful if I could use the restaurant's electricity, even if I did decide to go back to that half-assed net cafe. Rates were cheaper at night. The problem was that my battery might not last until then. I suddenly took out my adapter and plugged it into the cord that the woman, still seated, had lazily dragged my way with her foot. As I hugged the ground in order to plug my adapter into the outlet, the woman mischievously twitched her toes in her sandals. Perv. That was what she said to me once I raised my head, but she wasn't even wearing a skirt. I don't understand. Naturally, I just ignored it and booted up my computer. After that, the woman stopped messing with me, and the only sounds in the restaurant were the filtered voices from the television and the swinging pots in the kitchen. This was a quiet area without much foot traffic, and it felt like time passed slowly here. The thing that made me go far out of my way to come here, other than the fact that they would report me to the cops, was this tranquility. What did you eat yesterday? Well, it was pretty tranquil until the woman suddenly asked me a question. What did I had to eat yesterday have anything to do with you? I ignored her as I stared at my screen, but she just wouldn't stop looking at me. Her face, visible from the corner of my eye, didn't make it look like she was particularly interested in the question, but she wouldn't turn away. Defeated, I raised my glance, and at that moment she grinned. Pasta, I answered, then turned back to my screen. I updated my data while I was in the cafe, so I searched for any corporate news that might affect the market in the next few days. From where? As I clicked my tongue, the woman's smile, as expected, disappeared. She didn't get mad or stand up, though. That doesn't suit you, you know. She said this so seriously that instead of getting mad, I ended up blushing. She's treating me like a complete child. Big Bull Cafe. It was an arrogantly named place for a nearly illegal operation. You see, bulls were symbols of strong markets. There's a bull and then there's a bear. For that reason, there were bronze bulls placed in front of the biggest financial districts in the world, like America's Wall Street or the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So for me, the place was good luck. Huh, so Saralt's handmade pasta. Saralt? Wasn't there a real skinny guy there? The guy that owns the place? Owns the... I was a little heartbroken at those words. I was just sure that he was just some loser who worked there by the hour, but to be the owner of a store, big or small, was a fine example of a capitalist. Not only that, I was heartbroken to hear that I was eating his pasta. I mean, it was good. I taught him how to make those. The one beamed with pride. Wait, if she taught him, then where did they know each other from? Don't tell me they used to be lovers. As I dreamed up juicy scenarios in my head, I stared vacantly at her face as she turned back to the television. So, was that lunch? Dinner? Huh? Did you eat that for lunch or dinner? I didn't have the slightest idea as to why she was asking for all these details. It was probably because of some stupid made-for-woman horoscope that she watched every day. I bet it was something like, if you ask a boy you meet today what and where he ate for lunch each meal yesterday, your lucky color is yellow and your lucky word is optimism. Dinner. About lunch. I had set out to click my tongue, but after being told straight-faced that it didn't suit me, I ended up holding back. The woman might have noticed this fact because she was grinning slightly. I answered her after telling her in my mind to shut up. I didn't eat it. Really? This time I didn't keep myself from clicking my tongue or from getting angry for that matter. Why she wanted to know these things in such detail completely baffled me. And why do you care? Right as I turned her question around on her, a plate of fried rice hit the counter with a thud. The woman stood up and brought the plate over. Then, right as I thought she was going to place it on the table, she kept the plate in her hand and looked down at me. You really didn't eat anything for lunch? As if to show her that I was trying my hardest not to click my tongue, I started to scrape my upper lip with my teeth. No, I didn't. I don't eat lunch on weekdays. Well, what about today? Today's an exception, since I was driven out of the cafe at a weird time. So what? Just give me the food that you're just holding there. Eating a proper lunch was something special to me, since I usually only did it on Sundays when the Lunar Stock Exchange was closed. Eating lunch on a weekday was very rare. As I glared at the woman, she heaved a small sigh and placed the plate on the table, completely unperturbed. The smell of the sweet and sour sauce whetted my appetite. My interest shifted from the now strangely annoying woman's questions to the food right in front of me. You need to eat 3 meals a day. 3 real meals a day. The woman talked to me while standing and staring at me, digging into the fried rice. And eat a little more neatly. Mind your own business, I muttered mentally as I piled a mountain of fried rice and crab omelet on my spoon and shoved it all in my mouth. The woman sighed and then returned listlessly to her counter-side chair. What a cryptic, stupid woman. I focused on my food, stuffing my stomach with such vigor that I barely had time to even sigh. Ugh. For filling my stomach with fried rice, I ordered the ayu jelly, a sweet and sour gelatinous dish. It was unusual to see this dessert around here, but it was definitely delicious, if a little expensive. Since today was a cursed day, I thought that it might be just the exorcism I needed. You got the money, right? The woman doubted me after I made my order, but of course I had enough money to have a regular meal. You could rent a cheap apartment for 400 muls a month, so I could live on my own pretty easily. The reason I actually couldn't was because there weren't any places a minor with no guarantor could rent. I heard that on Earth, people in my situation were sometimes able to make it happen. Unfortunately, lunar cities were only accessible via orbital elevator, and so everyone's identity was already known. If I went to rent a house, I'd immediately run my fingerprints and an iris scan and then contact my parents. Unless you were an extraterrestrial, if you're on the moon, they know who you are and where you came from. Have I ever stiffed you? Just because you paid in the past doesn't mean that you're sure to pay next time. And anyway, you ran away from home, right? You need to take better care of your money. I felt a strange sense of comfort in the fact that her lecture wasn't about my running away itself. And overall, I agreed with the idea that people should take care of the money. You don't have to tell me that. Oh, really? The woman shrugged, then carried the ayu jelly from the counter where it had just appeared. It was hard to argue with her, since I was, in fact, wasting money here. But I was confident that I had more money than anyone else my age. What's more, I'd never gone on a wild spending spree before. The magic of compound interest made the world go round. If 1 mul today turned into 10 in a year, then 3 years after that, it'd be 10,000. Compared to that, what my dad would make in his entire life, earning roughly the same amount every month from sweating in the fields to grow vegetables, in 5 years, there'd be no way I'd be eating in a lame restaurant like this. That woman might be making fun of me now, but I'll bet I'd eventually be wearing a stylish suit and living in a high-rise apartment in Newton City. And of course, I was not going to stop there. That wasn't where my dream ended. It's where it began. If you're some rich actor, you might be able to bask in space on the opposite side of the moon with some beautiful woman by your side. But if you were one of the wealthiest here in this lunar city, you could go even further. You could make all the emotions and desires you feel when you look up at space come true. I ate the sweet and sour clump of ayu jelly, and as I looked at my screen to choose the tree that would grow me money, I was immersed in a familiar daydream. This place was the forefront of humanity, a golden city of wealth and prosperity. I would run through the city's gates. I'd outwit the geniuses and prodigies from Earth to take my place there at last. I silently got myself worked up during this quiet early afternoon in a Chinese restaurant. I moved my touch mouse back and forth, and just as I brought up the display for the prominent, even on the moon, investment bank E.J. Rockberg, customers entered the store. I thought it was strange that customers would come in at this hour and raised my head. At that moment, a feeling ran throughout my body like an ice cube that had been stuck up my asshole. Welcome. 2, please. Yes, sir. Table for 2. The woman said this in her usual carefree voice, but the words barely entered my ear. I lowered my cap even farther over my eyes and hunched over, trying to hide it in the reflection of my PC display. Looking at their clothes, it was unmistakable. The pair who just arrived at the tables on the other side of the restaurant were police officers on patrol. I'll get the attention done. Same here. Very well, to attention. It seemed like they just chose this place randomly during their patrol, but who likes eating in the same restaurant as the cops? Not only that, I think these two were the ones who were at the Big Bull Cafe, according to my faint memory. The patrol route for the police didn't include going into cafes, so someone had to have tipped them off somehow. I was not some sort of invisible man, so someone surely must have seen me hanging around in a weird place at a weird time. Whoever that someone was, if they told the police that there was a shady-looking kid around, there'd only be a handful of places they'd search. It was totally possible that those two were looking for me. That might also be the reason that the policeman facing me was glancing at me now and then. But to think that he'd take off and lead us on this wild goose chase. The policeman with his back to me suddenly spoke up, stopped looking at me, waited a moment before replying to his partner. Well, it was just some big shots looking at maps all day who decided how wide our area of jurisdiction has to be. And there wasn't any public survey system in that area either. But I think that if he was hiding somewhere, it would have been in that net joint. Well, the storekeeper there was a pretty sketchy looking guy too. Maybe we should grab him and rough him up a little. Don't judge by appearances. He ended up having a pretty impressive history, didn't he? Yeah, I guess. Man, I should have studied harder at the academy. I never thought to be assigned to the boonies like this. Vocation has nothing to do with it. You just need to carry out your duties. You're very right about that. So they really were looking for someone. But the owner, that Siralt guy, had an impressive history. Can't even begin to imagine. What would we do after this? If we go by the book, we just started the usual thing with questioning people. His co-worker, facing me, took a sip of water and went quiet as if in thought. I got the feeling that he was taking a good hard look at me. In my mind, I was praying that they gave up on the questioning and just went back to their nest. If we call in for reinforcements, we're just going to get laughed at. Looks like we got no choice. Anyway, our duty is to keep public order. Cracks in public safety begin in the smallest of places. Even if it is just one boy, you can't let him get away. My heart felt like it might just jump right out of my mouth. Now there was no mistake. They were tipped off by someone and were out looking for me. Lunar cities were nuts about keeping public order. Even in the Red Valley, where suspicious guys wandered the streets, there wasn't not even the faintest trace of any real danger. It was just a degenerate, pleasure-seeking town. Everyone knew just how risky committing an act of physical violence was in a place this small. I mean, after all, if you were deported back to the residential management court, there'd be no question that you'd never be able to come back. The only people exempt from that form of punishment were people who were born on the moon, obviously, because they can't come back anywhere. Even then, if you committed second-degree murder or worse, it was not so certain. Of course, I wouldn't be subject to the penal code just because I ran away from home, but the overall zeal for maintaining public order would mean that I'd be sent back home. After that, I'd probably be forced to report to a local facility every day until I became an adult. While that happened, I'd grow further and further away from the front line of the world and would eventually be swallowed up by the masses. I fixed my darting eyes on my hands and thought desperately, how should I escape from here? If I grabbed my PC and ran, the plug would get in the way. If I unplug the adapter from my PC, then take off running with just the unit? My identity could be given away by the adapter, but it was still better than being captured. Or should I just stay still right here and wait for them to leave? I'd like to do that if it's possible, but that officer is staring at me like he was about to stand up and shout, "Hey, you," to me at any moment. My cold sweat dripped onto my keyboard. Wait, that woman wouldn't have ratted me out, would she? As I thought of this possibility, I was tortured by a desperate rage, but suddenly a shadow appeared on the table. It was the woman. More water? Poured me a refill. I cursed her in my heart, wishing that she wouldn't draw their attention towards me at a time like this. My lowered face was totally flushed, but a piece of paper with words written on it was attached to the side of the cup she conked down on the table. Get ready. I nearly raised my head, but the woman quickly left my table before I could make the mistake. I set my computer to mute and shut it down so that they didn't notice that the OS was no longer running. I'll give up on the adapter. I quietly pulled the cord out of my main unit and confirmed the location of my bag. I already used the money I always kept in my jacket pocket at the cafe, so I'll use what I had in my back pocket. There was a line in an old Mafia movie that I saw at home that said that a $10 bill kept in your clothes was a business card to God. It certainly kept you all well prepared. I quietly placed a 10 mil bill on my hand, perked up my ears, and waited for the right timing. The policeman had been staring at me non-stop. He was definitely suspicious of me. With a clang, the policeman started to get up. Tension up! At that very moment, the tension was placed on the counter loudly. What's wrong? Cop called out to his partner, who was now halfway out of his seat. Is it the guy behind me? Right after he said this, the woman's voice rang energetically throughout the room. Thanks for waiting. Here's your tension. Oh, yeah. The one with his back turned to me turned his attention back to the food. The other one was looking at me, but because the woman was sitting next to his corner seat, he was stuck in his seat and couldn't get out. Now was the moment. The woman looked at me. It was my only chance. I pulled my head over my face, closed my PC with my head still down, grabbed it, and shoved it into my bag. Payments on the table. I said this as quietly as possible and left the $10 bill on the table. Hey, you, wait! The officer clearly told me to stop, but I just gave him a sideways glance as I walked quickly toward the exit. It was only a distance of 3 steps, but it felt like forever. The yelling officer attempted to chase after me, but with the woman in his way, he couldn't get out. Ah! The shrill scream came from the woman, who lost her balance after being pushed by the officer. She turned to the other officer, still sitting in his chair. The piping hot tension looked like it was about to spill. Acting out of his natural self-defense, the officer caught the bolt in his hands. By that time, I had successfully exited the store. I took off running as if nothing else in the world mattered. To be honest, it doesn't. So I think that's going to be it for part 1 of World End Economica. Please let me know how you liked the video. If you want to see more of it, I really appreciate it. Likes are always good judgment. So make sure to subscribe if you want to see more content, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody.